There's at least one great river in almost every state and province across North America, and for Alberta, that's the Bow River. Flowing along the eastern edge of the Rockies not far from Banff National Park, the Bow River is a fly fisher's dream. Today we're going to be diving into what makes this river so special, how you can plan your next trip, and what we can learn from the guy who guaranteed a giant trout on every trip or your money back. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Josh Nugent, Bow River outfitter and fly casting university master's grad, is going to share how he does it all today. You'll find out why the Bow is like the Vegas Strip for trout, why big browns aren't the only game in town, and the 3,000-mile river that cuts its way all the way from the base of the Rockies to Hudson's Bay in the eastern Canada. Plus, you will find out about Josh's master project that we talked about, where he studied 10 of the greatest fly casters in the world and what you can learn from these guys today. Here we go, another big epic episode. Josh Nugent from OutFlyFishing.com. How you doing, Josh?
Good, you?
Great. Yeah, I'm doing well this morning. We are rolling here with the podcast. I'm interested in we've had some episodes around all over Canada, and Alberta. I think today it'll be great to talk some high level and then zoom in on out fly fishing, because you have a great shop out there. I want to hear about the shop and some of the trips you do in your program. But before we get into all that, I'd love to take it back to the start real quick. Have you been fly fishing since you were a kid, or did you get started later in life? What's that look like?
I was pretty lucky. I got started when I was 6 years old on the Sheep River, actually. My dad and my uncle were two of the big influences for me there. My uncle had actually taken like an intro fly fishing course, kind of what we offer, a 101 type course. Loved it, was so excited about it that he was showing my dad. My dad had taken up bow hunting and showed my uncle. My uncle took up fly fishing and showed my dad. And I remember my brother and I were out with my dad and my uncle, and when you're a 6-year-old kid and you watch someone fly fishing and you've got a little push button spin casting reel, you're like, what they're doing is way cooler than what I'm doing. I need to be doing that. And that was just kind of it. For a lot of years we did the typical, like, you take your fly rod and you take your spinning rod, because if you can't catch fish on the fly rod, you would resort to the spinning rod. And then it wasn't until I started when I was in university and I started working at a fly shop that I was like, okay, I don't really have an interest in touching anything but the fly rod anymore. And, in the last almost 25 years, I've only had one time that I've fished anything but a fly rod. And that was buddies took us sturgeon fishing, and fly fishing wasn't really an option there. So other than that, that's the only time I've really touched a rod that wasn't fly fishing in the last 25 years.
Nice. And the shop's interesting too, I think, because in Canada, you don't hear of as many fly shops. I feel like there's more of just kind of conventional stores, but you have a big shop. When did the fly shop start for you? When did that idea come to be?
I would say I bought a fly shop by accident. I had no kind of plans or intention to. I was getting back from Christmas Island, and my buddy Steve Gardner was messaging me when I was sitting on a layover on the way home, and he's like, "How are you getting home from the airport?" And I'm like, "I don't know, man. That's tomorrow. I haven't figured that out yet." He's like, "I'll pick you up." I'm like, "Okay, thanks." I'm like, "I'll take you to breakfast for picking me up." And then we're eating breakfast, and like Steve had been on a bunch of the hosted trips we'd done, because even before I had a fly shop, I had been hosting trips to Cuba and to Belize and various places, and he'd been on several of our hosted trips, and so he was interested in Christmas Island, or so I thought. That's why he wanted to go for breakfast. And then like 5 minutes into breakfast, he's been asking all these questions about Christmas Island, and I'm telling him about GTs and triggers and this and that, and all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, do you want to buy a fly shop?" And I literally just about spit food all over the table. I'm like, "No, why would I do that? Like, I already run longer days than everybody else is doing. Why would I do that?" And he's like, "Just hear me out." And I told him it was a terrible idea, and 20 minutes later we were driving down to what at the time it was West Wind's fly shop at the time, which was one of the older shops in town. And that's kind of the neat thing for us right now. Like, May 1st will be our 10th anniversary since we bought and rebranded it, but that shop has been around for 20 plus years before that. So
Wow.
the history of that shop, we've got both ends of it. We've got kind of the oldest shop in town now because of West Winds is what I bought. Before West Winds, it was Smallman shop that Peter Smallman owned, and now we rebranded 10 years ago to the guide service that I'd had, because I started a guide service when I was a 21-year-old kid and just trying to pay for my undergrad and graduate school. And that was what I did. I didn't take out any student loans. I was just
Huh.
working. And yeah, guiding paid for that. And I was coaching college basketball.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. They were kind of the two perfect off seasons of each other because other than September, September was a nightmare because I had tryouts and everything. Plus, September was also busy. But with it being university students, most of my boys all had jobs and stuff, part-time jobs as well as going to school. So they could go to their classes, go to their job, and then we would have practices at like 9 o'clock at night. So I could still guide all day and then run practices at night.
Wow.
Yeah, I did that for 6 years.
There you go. That's sweet. Yeah, I love we're talking basketball, a little sports. We'll have to hear some of this too. So, but you get this shop and now, yeah, you have this basically, more than 30-year-old shop, but you've had it for 10 years. What is it? What's it been like? I mean, it's pretty much, I mean, the Bow River is kind of the famous, right? One of the famous rivers. Has that always been your focus?
Yes and no. Like the thing I tell people, it's kind of like if you go to Vegas, like you're gonna go to the Strip and see all the flashing lights and all the casinos and MGM Grand, and you're gonna see the fountain display and all that stuff. But there's a lot of cool things like you can go see the Grand Canyon, right?
Right.
So the Bow is kind of like the Vegas Strip. It's what everybody comes here for, but then we have such phenomenal fisheries around it. Like Calgary has one of the furthest south populations of native northern pike. Like again, they're called northern pike, not southern pike,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So yes, there's places as far south I know of as Utah, maybe even further south than that, where they're in reservoirs and places like that. But for native populations of incredible trophy fish, like I've guided at flying lodges up north, and it's incredible to have people at these lodges that might only get fished by, a handful of people each year, but their growing season can be like 5 months shorter than what we have here, right? So our ice comes off way earlier, and then our ice doesn't go back on until way later. And so we've got up to 5 months compared to some of those northern lodges in like Alaska and Northwest Territories, Yukon, Northern Saskatchewan, places like that. So our fish aren't incredibly long by comparison. They're heavy. So like most of the time we never weigh fish, but using the formulas and stuff for length and girth, we've had fish that would be triple the body weight of some of the fish I've caught, like of a 44-inch fish up north,
Oh, wow.
right? And so we've got this exceptional pike fishery. If you go east, like for anyone that doesn't know Calgary, it's very much like Denver. It's in the shadow of the Rockies, but it's right on the edge of the prairie. So as soon as you go east of town, you're getting into the prairie reservoirs that have, these incredible populations of pike in them. And then if you go west, you're getting like 10 minutes west of town, you're into the foothills. 10, 15 minutes past that, you're getting into the Rocky Mountains, or maybe half an hour past the foothills. So we've got so many different fisheries. Like Calgary is this perfect little hub, and I can kind of, I guess, start from Calgary and spread out. So if you go south of Calgary, it's only a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive, and you're at the Montana border because we're directly above Montana. And so from there, you've got a bunch of really cool tailwater fisheries down there that are exceptional fisheries. Like we've got the St. Mary's, we've got the Waterton, we've got the Old Man River. You've got these really cool tailwater fisheries down there that are right in the shadow of the Rockies because Alberta is basically shaped like a rectangle. That the bottom left corner has just been cut off at a 45, and that 45-degree angle is the Rocky Mountains and the Great Divide. And so the further south you get, the closer the mountains come to you when you're going south of Calgary. And then our mountain fisheries, like you've got the Crow's Nest River and that whole drainage. You've got that Old Man drainage that has so many different tributaries, and like they're phenomenal cutthroat fisheries. We have like TJ Roy, he works for Orvis, and like high up in retail where all the district managers for Orvis all report to TJ. And when he was here and on the Old Man, he was like, "This is the most incredible cutthroat fishery I've ever seen." Like the size of the fish is exceptional, the number of those big fish is exceptional, but just the scenery that you're in, like the shoreline of the river, can be, a cliff face that goes up thousands of feet.
Yeah. Banff, right? You're not far from Banff National Park.
Yeah, so Banff National Park is if you go straight west of Calgary, and that's the thing that most people have heard of, kind of like most Canadians might have heard of Yellowstone, but they might not have heard of other places that are, you know, might be better fishing than inside the park. Banff National Park for us is a little bit different because up there, it's so close to the glacier. Like the Bow River starts in Banff National Park, and you've got the glacier, and that goes into Bow Lake, or Numtijah is the name, and then it flows out of there and through the park, and it's small, and it's that beautiful aqua velva blue, but it has almost no nutrients in it. So it's got little to no bug life, so it's got very few fish, and the fish that it has are very small and they're very skinny. It's not until you start to get downstream of Calgary that you've got three water treatment plants that are putting, treated effluent back into the river, and it's clean. It's supposedly drinkable. I wouldn't drink it personally, but it's supposedly drinkable.
Yeah.
But it's high in phosphate and nitrate concentrations, which supports a ton of weed growth. Weed growth supports bug life. Bug life turns out that's fish food. So it's a really weird situation where a city of 1 million people is actually where the good fishing starts, whereas we have so many guests from all over the world that look at it like, oh, we need to fish the bow up in the mountains where it's still clean and cold, because once it gets past town, it's obviously a toxic waste dump. And it's the complete opposite of that, that this is where the trophy fishery starts, is downstream of Calgary through the tailwater section of it. When you go upstream, that water's super cold. It's like postcard beautiful, but it just isn't a great fishery. And if you go back probably 25 to 30 years ago, like when I was first getting into guiding, it was just kind of tapering off as a decent fishery. It wasn't like the lower bow, but it was decent, and it was a respectable fishery that if tourists are up there, you could take them. And then for years, it just kept declining. People were like, man, what's happening? People in their conspiracy theories that like, yeah, there was a railroad spill and they hit it, or, there's this slough. And that's 30 years ago, the towns of Lake Louise and Banff and Canmore put in state-of-the-art water treatment plants and went, if we're going to be green, eco-friendly communities, we shouldn't be putting basically just treated sewage into the river. We need to clean that up. And so they did. And so they took the only nutrients out of this glacial river that it had, and the bug life just started to peter out, and the fish started to get skinnier and fewer, and it's reverted back to kind of more of that native fishery that it was. That's not an incredible fishery up there. It's not until you get downstream of Calgary.
Oh, downstream. So the Bow River, where you get into some of the famous waters is downstream of Calgary.
Yeah, all of it is once you're downstream of Calgary and you're downstream of that dam. Like there's a dam on the immediate upstream edge of Calgary, and so we're in a tailwater here, and so we've got more stable flows. The bug life is exceptional, the weed growth is exceptional, and so that's why it's such a incredible fishery downstream of Calgary. But upstream of Calgary, it's like it doesn't get fished very much because it's fishing in a postcard. Like it got to the point, Dave, that for people, like we used to get people that wanted to fish it all the time, and they would be like, well, we're staying in Banff, so we want to fish the upper bow. We're like, well, it's not going to fish anywhere near as well. It's not the river that you've heard of. They're like, yeah, we still want to fish it. And every time the same thing happened, is that because they were staying there an hour and a half away from Calgary, they didn't want to drive down to Calgary. They wanted us to go up there, so we would go up there and guide them. And then the end of the day, everybody was like, man, that was really disappointing. We thought it would fish better. And we're like, we told you. Like I had a lady that I had 13 phone calls with her trying to convince her. She's like, okay, we'll do the lower bow, and then reverted back. Oh no, we're going to do the upper. I talked to him, and then wrote a review that we're like, we were really disappointed that the fishing wasn't that great. We thought it would be better. And I'm like, so like, and I told her, like, I need you to understand that if we're fishing up there, you're not wanting to catch fish. You don't care about fish at all. The only way we'll take people on the upper bow is if they do not care about catching fish at all, and their only interest is casting in a scenic environment. If all you want to do is cast in a postcard, we'll do it. If you want to have any chance at catching fish, we can't guide up there because everyone is disappointed. And they're like, man, it didn't seem like the guides really were that into it. It's like, because they wanted you to have a good day, and you didn't want to have a good day. You wanted to cast in that postcard.
That's crazy. Where does the bow so it's flowing out, like you said, from the national park out. Where does it eventually go into? Where does it flow?
Into the Hudson's Bay eventually, so the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, wow. No kidding. It goes all the way across Canada.
All the way across the country.
That's unbelievable.
The bow joins up with the Old Man River in the southeastern corner of the province. From that point on, it's considered the South Saskatchewan River. The South Saskatchewan River and the North Saskatchewan River that runs through Edmonton, those join up, and it's considered the Saskatchewan River. Those run through Lake Diefenbaker. It runs into Manitoba.
Wow. And it's all connected. Could Atlantic salmon, like what was that like historically, say, whatever, 1,000 years ago before dams and stuff?
Still too far because we'd be talking about thousands and thousands of kilometers, so they'd be dead before they got
Oh,
here,
right. Yeah,
type
yeah, too
thing. Like
far.
it like Oregon Trail, pretty much, right? Like that's like pack a couple lunches.
Yeah.
But yeah, historically that would have been potentially possible. There was somebody years ago that actually did by kayak. I think he went from the headwaters all the way out to the Hudson Bay.
No kidding.
Yeah, and like just had to portage around dams and stuff like that. But other than that, was able to do that whole journey, which is pretty neat. Because yeah, that water from here ends up in the Atlantic Ocean because we're on the eastern
Wow.
slopes here.
Oh, because you're literally, yeah, you're on the east side of the Rockies, right? So crazy.
Yeah, and the very western edge of it, so our water has a very long journey by the time it gets to the ocean.
Fish the Fly Guide Service is dedicated to sharing the incredible fly fishing opportunities around Jackson Hole. Whether floating the scenic Snake River in search of native cutthroat trout or hiking into the mountains to explore pristine tributaries, every day on the water is an adventure. You can join them for an unforgettable fly fishing experience in the heart of the Tetons at fishthefly.com. Patagonia just launched the next evolution in waders, and they're built for anglers just like you. The Swift Current line includes ultralight, packable options for the hiking, crew, and expedition-ready waders if you're hard on your gear like me. They're designed for comfort, built from recycled materials, and backed by Patagonia's ironclad warranty. You can check them out right now at wetflyswing.com/swiftcurrent. That's wetflyswing.com/SWIFTCURRENT. Swift Current waders. Check them out now. What is just in generally Alberta? So you talked about a few of these places, the tailwaters, St. Mary's, the Old Man, the pike fishing. What else is like as you go up north, you got Edmonton above you. What is that northern Alberta that, does it just get more remote and harder to get to areas to fish?
Yeah, so as you get past Calgary, you get up kind of jump before we get to Edmonton is that Red Deer, the central Alberta area. And it's interesting because like we call Red Deer central Alberta and then Edmonton northern Alberta. If you look on a map, Edmonton is still in the bottom third of the province, but it's something like 90% of Canada's population is within 100 miles of the US border. Once you get a couple hours north of Edmonton, the population is extremely sparse. And so the population density is super, super low. So everything above that, there's a lot of it that doesn't get fished a lot. And probably the top third of the province doesn't even really have road access. If you're not going in on a float plane, you're not getting into it. So that top third is probably just kind of float plane or like winter road access stuff. Up there, you'd be a lot of pike, walleye, lake trout in those lakes. Rivers would have grayling in them, pike in a lot of those lakes as well. And then as you come down around that Edmonton area, it would be that same sort of thing where you would have a lot of pike lake. You still got some stock trout lakes around Edmonton, but most of it would be pike and walleye fishing that you would have around the Edmonton area. And then if you go west again, far enough west towards the border with BC, then you're going to start getting into like around Lake Athabasca, or not Lake Athabasca, it's nowhere near it, the Athabasca River, sorry. That would have bull trout in it. And it actually has the Athabasca rainbow, which is the only rainbow trout that's native to Alberta.
Oh, wow.
Everything else, all the other rainbows were just stocked and brought from Europeans. Famous brown trout aren't native to here.
Wow. And you can find those in the Rockies up there.
Yep, up closer to Jasper National Park and hitting that type of area.
Oh, to Jasper, yeah, yeah. And which is Jasper is similar, yeah, just kind of, a little bit south of Prince George, in that whole area.
Yep.
So
Yep.
BC, okay.
Exactly. And so if you're going from Calgary to Banff, you go straight west to get to Banff, and then you start going north from Banff, and that's how you get to Jasper. And then Jasper, like we just got back 2 nights ago from Terrace. We're up there steelheading.
Oh, you were? Oh, cool.
And came through Prince George, and then you go through Jasper, and then down through Banff, and then back to Calgary. And so Jasper's 5 hours from Calgary, and then PG is 8 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, Terrace is a 16-hour drive through the night.
It's 16, that's not bad. How was where were you guys at? How was fishing?
Fishing was really good at washing flies and lines. It was the typical steelhead. So we drove through the night. We had our last Thursday night fly tying of the year. So all through the winter, we do Thursday night fly tying. And then that ended at 9:30. We left at 10 o'clock, drove through the night, 16 and a half hours, got to the river and third cast, hooked a steelhead, absolute chrome fish. Certainly made that drive worthwhile, but we were going back 2 weeks ago. We went with two of the staff members, Keith, who does all of our social media and marketing, Ty, who does, all of our fly tying lessons, 101s, 201s, 301s. He does all of our fly fishing 101, 201, 301 lessons and does the guiding for the shop as well. He's caught Atlantic salmon. He's an incredible fly tyer. I actually did film on him when he was like 14. He started working the shop when he was 12.
Oh wow.
Did a film that went in IF4 about him ties flies because he did these incredible classic Atlantic salmon flies. And so I took him when he was a young kid out Atlantic salmon fishing, but he'd never caught a steelhead. So we went 2 weeks ago. He hooked one, reel kind of froze up, and then free spooled on him with the fish like right at his feet in the shallows, and he lost it. So he was heartbroken. So wanted to go back. So we went back for the Easter weekend because it was the only, like, between now and July, I don't have any weekends that are free. Every single weekend is booked with something, with an event. And so this was the only chance over Easter. So it was kind of hard being away from my family for Easter, but it was nice being up there with my fly shop family, so to speak, because I had Steve and Keith and Ty. Steve's a good buddy of mine that guides with us at the shop and did like a huge amount of the rentals for anybody that's seen all the rentals we did in 2022. We like completely expanded, knocked out the wall, took over a new space, tore it down to bare concrete floors, tore the whole like ceilings out, redid floor to roof. There's nothing in there that's the same type thing. And Steve did like a huge amount of those renos with me. A really good buddy. So
gosh.
Yeah, those were the three people that I desperately needed to get steelhead, and
you
I
had
got
some
a fish in the
chances.
third cast, and that was it. Yeah.
What were you guys doing? Were you staying at a lodge or just camping out there? What were you doing?
We just stayed at a hotel.
Oh,
in
hotel.
Terrace.
Oh, cool.
I've done the camp thing, but at the same time, I like when you're going into another town in a region like that to try and support the local economy, and so having money flow back into that region and that town by staying at hotels. And we went into the fly shop in town, and everyone who, I mean, we're carrying thousands of dollars in flies, and we all went in and bought a bunch of flies, walked out of there, and it's just like, didn't say anything, and they had no idea that we worked at a fly shop or that I owned a fly shop. But I was
what was the shop there? What's the name of the shop there?
I could have told you if you didn't. This is in Terrace, so
it's Fish Tales.
Fish Tales, that's what it is. Yeah, Fish Tales. And so that was the one. Super friendly. They were really kind to everybody in there when we went in. So it was really nice and great experience and whatnot. So it was fun. I love going into fly shops. I used to go into fly shops all the time. Now in town, I don't visit fly shops anymore because there's lots of other fly shops in town. But I always feel like if you go in there, someone's going to think you're a spy or something.
Oh, right. How many are there?
So there's 4 fly shops in town now, and then another one just opened up outside of town, about half an hour outside of town.
Wow, so there's 5 fly shops in Calgary, in and around Calgary.
Yeah, and there used to be, when I first bought the shop, there was 8. And we also have, or at the time, we also had 4 box stores with a dedicated fly department in them, because there's a Bass Pro, a Cabela's, there was a Wholesale Sports, there's a Fishing Hole. And so, yeah, there's not as many as there used to be. A few have closed down in past years and whatnot, but
I feel like Calgary is it, when you think of Canada, it's probably hard to compare because you go over to Ontario and things like that, but it feels like Calgary is a hub of like maybe I always think of like Fly Fishing USA. There's a couple places people talk about in New York, but it feels like Calgary is one of those places that's just like a hub for fly fishing. Is that what it feels like where you're at?
Yeah, 100%. It's got the highest density of fly shops in the country. Like you look at Toronto, which is around 8 million people, it has 1 shop. You look at Calgary that has 1.2 million people, and we've got 5, right? Edmonton has 1. You go to Vancouver, and I think they only have 1 dedicated fly shop. I guess it's got 2 locations, Michael and Young Fly Shop, but everybody else is fly and light tackle. There's only 1 dedicated fly shop. They've got 2 locations in Vancouver and in Surrey, but yeah, like in terms of trout, this is the hub for the country.
Why is that? What makes the Calgary area? You mentioned it probably already, but why is it that is it the place to go that you should be checking out?
For one, it's the bow. Like the quality of the fishery is incredible. Like I haven't been able to do this anymore when I have other people guiding for me, but when I was a university student that's just trying to pay for school and when you're 21 years old, you can't tell people, yeah, I've been doing this for 30 years. You haven't been alive that long,
No.
right? And they're expecting the white hair, the gray beard. And like I got treated by other guides like I was this kid in diapers that didn't deserve to be alive, let alone guiding on the river. You can't charge less than anyone else because now you're going to be undercutting the going rate, and that's not fair to everyone that's doing it. So like what can you do? I grew up on a farm where it was like pulling your body weight if you were as skinny as I wasn't good enough. So you just got to work a lot harder than that. And so I was like, well, how hard can I work? What can I do? What can I do to differentiate myself? And for 12 years, I think the first 12 years, I offered a 20-inch fish guarantee. If you
Oh,
didn't
wow.
land a fish over 20 inches, I would rebook you a half price trip. In
That's
12 years, I did
amazing.
2 half price trips.
No
That's
kidding.
the type of fishery. Yeah. And so there were other days that I had that people didn't get, like land a fish over 20, that people were like, absolutely not. We caught the most fish we've ever caught in our life. We hooked countless fish over that size. We landed so many fish that were like 19 and a half, 19 3/4. You didn't lie. You didn't try and BS on any of those fish. Like, there's no way we're taking another like a half price trip. We're rebooking at full
Yeah.
price. And I was like, cool. It's there. It's offered.
That's so good. The 20-inch guarantee is like, I mean, from a marketing perspective, is like, it's so good because even if you don't get it, like you said, the people that likely are going to have a good trip and it's probably going to not be a big deal anyways. But I'm sure that did you see that after a while that you started to hear that started the 20-inch guarantee kind of started to spread?
Yeah, and I would hear from other guides that would come up in a boat life. They're like, "Wait, I heard this thing from so you're not actually doing that, are you?" And I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Whoa," and then just kind of walk away. And it was kind of funny. And people were like, "Well, how?" And I was like, "Well, my days are 6 hours or 7 hours either, right?" And there were certainly some days that we spent a lot extra time on the water trying to make sure that we got that fish for people.
Right. Yeah, you put your time in.
Exactly. But it was also like, again, I was a 21-year-old kid, and you've got guides that have been doing it for 20 years besides you on the river. How do you differentiate yourself? Right? You can't say you've been doing it for 20 years. You've just barely been alive that long. And so, yeah, it was just like work hard, row back up through the seam. I literally, Dave, I had guides. Like when I first started, it was very much this old boys club, and there was no like helping new people or trying to introduce them.
Who's the old timer? We've had him on the podcast. I'm drawing a blank on his name. The big
Barry
guy.
White.
Yeah, Barry.
Barry White. Yeah. And so, like, Barry'd been doing it for a long time. Barry's been doing it for, I think, 40 years now. And so when I first started, though, it was that old boys club. You don't belong here. You don't have white hair. You don't have a gray beard. You're just some kid in diapers that doesn't deserve to be here. But then I had happy customers, and I had people that were catching fish. And I literally had guides pull me aside in the parking lot and say, "You got to stop this whole rolling back up crap." I was like, "What?" This whole like rolling back up and going through a seam another time, like enough of that. You can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't go back up? What? Why? You're like, well, you're making other people look bad. And I was like, dude, from my angle, I swear you had oars in your hand too. Like it looked like it. If you pull on those, it slows the boat down.
Right.
If you pull hard enough, you actually go back up. Right. And so yeah, things have changed a lot. It was why, like, when I started our guide training school, like, there wasn't one in Western Canada. And it was like, there were all these people that wanted to get into it. Coaching was my background. One of my buddies that is our hosted travel manager, Akasha Bob, he's a school teacher, coaching his background as well. Like, but he's also an administrator where leadership and developing curriculums, that's his background. And so when I sat down and laid out the curriculum, it was like, there's so many young guides. And I shouldn't say just young guides, because there's a lot of people, new guides, people that had retired from their job, but they wanted to get into it, that they were there for a year or two and they were gone because whether it's one of those unspoken, unwritten cardinal sins or faux pas. There's so many things in fly fishing that we have all these rules and this etiquette, but it's not written down. People don't talk about it. But if you ever do something wrong, an outfitter will never book you again, and you'll get blacklisted. And people say, like, never use that guy. He's going to card clients, or they're going to do this or that. But there's nowhere, like, you go to a golf course and there's rules. And on a river, there's just as many expected rules, but people don't talk about them, and people don't post them, and people can't even agree on them. And so it's one of those things that I've seen so many people that they would have been phenomenal guides if someone had actually just helped them and told them, like, you're doing so many good things. You just can't do that, man, because that's not okay. And you're not being malicious and you're not trying to do something. But like when that customer asked you at the end of the day, do you have a card? And you're like, yeah, and you handed it out. Well, somebody else saw that, and now they think that you're trying to steal that customer because that trip didn't come from you. That trip came from an outfitter, right?
Oh,
And they
right,
didn't
right,
know to
right.
just say, you know what, the outfitter knows how to get a hold of me. And for them to know and trust that if you're requested by name, it doesn't matter if their head guide that's been working for them for 30 years doesn't have a trip that day. If you're requested by name and that's your second trip of your life, you get that trip because that's how the industry works. But if no one's told you that, it's hard to know that and it's hard to have that trust. And so there's so many things. Like, it's funny when people come and talk to me. And when the first year we started that guide training school, it was because every single person in that school had come to me and said, like, I want to get into guiding. I've heard you've trained other guides. Can you help me? And it was at a point that it was like, I don't have the time to keep training guides. Plus, I trained a whole bunch of guides that as soon as you train them, like, cool, thanks so much. Now I'm going to go start a company and compete with you.
Right.
Wait, and so that's why we did the guide training school, because it's like, you know what? Here, it's a 60-hour course. Like, I don't care who you guide for, whether you go and guide up north at a lodge, whether you're going to be starting up an outfitting company and directly competing with us. That's fine. We're going to give you all the same information because, like, information is power. If I could have had some of that information going, I would have killed to have that information. When I first started my company, all I knew is I had one guy that told me, like, yeah, just don't ever start guiding for somebody and then all of a sudden try and do your own thing and then try and steal all their clients. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds terrible. So I just started my own company straight out of the gates. But obviously when you're a 21-year-old kid, you don't have this big client base to draw from yet because you're brand new. So it took a long time to build things up. And so, and that's the really cool thing, is to see, like, there's outfitters on the river that went through our guide training school years ago, like some of them up to whenever we started it for around 10 years ago, that, they employ a handful of guides that have taken our guide training school as well. And I love seeing them out on the water. And yeah, technically they're competitors of ours, but who cares? Like, the more people on the water that do a better job of representing our industry, the better that is for the industry.
Yeah, the better experience for everybody, which is great.
Yeah, the better experience a customer has, the better their stories are when they go back and tell everybody about the Bow River, that, like, man, the guides were great. They worked hard. They did this. They were super professional. They never took the rod and fished. You know, uh,
Right.
any of those positive things that they're sharing that about our fishery. Now, when that person hears it and they're like, oh, cool, maybe I'll go to the Bow River, they might find that outfitter. They might find us. They might find one of our competitors, but it's going to be bringing people back to this industry, which is just a good thing.
Which is what you want. If we were going to be, let's say, grabbing some listeners here on the podcast and heading up to your area and setting up a trip for, say, a few days, what would you recommend? What would be a good all-around trip in the Calgary area? Would you say, would it be hitting the bow for 3 days or mixing it up? What would that look like?
So I would mix it up for sure. And this is one of the things I tell people when they ask that. And it's a great question, Dave, because people ask that all the time. It's like, okay, I'm coming up there. I've got 4 days. What should I? And I try and tell people, like, if you've got some flexibility, try and do at least 3 days, because the chance of you getting in the months of July, August, and September, that's our peak season. So our season kind of starts April, May. Spring is super feast or famine. I don't encourage people to travel here at that time of year because it could still snow. It could still be minus 20 Celsius, or it could be plus 25 Celsius. And so there's such a broad range what we could get. The fishing could be absolutely lights out. And I feel like in the spring, you're always telling people it's not always like this. Either you're getting like some of the craziest dry fly fishing I've ever seen, where fish, like, you can pile up your leader. And I've had first timers out that I literally watched someone. He was our former chief of police and he was first day fly fishing. His false cast hit the water as the fish was coming up to sip blue-winged olives. It ate, and while it was eating, his false cast hit the fish in the face with the fly. And so it whips it in the face, and the fish flares, and you see it be like, it's okay, I can still see out of this eye, and it came back up and ate his fly.
Nice.
Like when he laid it down on the next cast. You couldn't spook a fish if you tried. And so those, like, insane days often happen April, May. but you can also have the very next day where everything that you can record and measure, well, like you can have the identical conditions. So the flows are the same, the water temps are the same, the turbidity or the amount of clarity is exactly the same, the barometric pressure is the same, the air temperature is the same. Like anything that you can write down or record is identical, and you work all day to put one fish in the boat, and you're like, what happened? Like yesterday, I felt like a hero. Today, I feel like a zero. That's spring. And I always tell people, like, when you get one of those epic days in spring, you can't ever come back and tell a guide, like, oh, last time when I fished with Naoto or last time I was fishing with Steve, we got 200. No, no, no. That was exceptional. Enjoy it. That's awesome. But it's not typical. And that's spring. You're always like, it's not always like this. And then the next day, you're like, it's not always like this. Sometimes we catch fish on it. That's
Right.
spring. Once runoff happens in June, and typically June's a write-off, and that's where we do a ton of our pike fishing, is when the river blows out in June. July, August, September, in those 3 months, we've got super stable weather patterns. We've got stable water conditions, stable insect hatches, and stable fishing. Like, it is very rare that you would ever have a really brutal day in those 3 months that you couldn't put your finger on it exactly and be like, oh, this happened, and that's why it got really tough. Because if that hadn't, like, the water all of a sudden bumped up 2.5 feet, or all of a sudden they dropped the water like crazy, or we had this epic storm come through and there was hail and lightning, and that put the fish up. But like, it would so rarely happen that you can't put your finger right on what it was at that time of year, because it's such a consistent time of year. So if you have 3 days, it would be so rare that you would ever get 3 tough days of fishing. The more days you have, the better chance you're going to get one of those really epic days of fishing. And the more chance that if you do get one of those tough weather days or tough conditions, that it's one day and you're still going to see good days on either side of it. I would never come here and just fish the bow. I shouldn't say never.
Yeah.
Like, superlatives are dangerous.
Sure.
But I wouldn't recommend it typically, because we've just got such incredible fisheries. Our mountain cutthroat fisheries are amazing. And there's a couple fisheries that everyone goes to and they get just pounded, but there's so many mountain streams that don't receive a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Are these cutthroat? What are these cutthroat? What species of cutthroat are these?
West slope cutthroats.
Yeah, these are west slope. So these are which are the super aggressive fish, right?
Yeah, and so those are the ones that are native to here. We've got a bunch of our cutthroat streams where you can consistently, like, if you're just looking for big fish, you could fish to nothing but 18+ inch fish all day. Now, those are going to be harder fish to catch because they're much more educated. Like, people forget, catch and release works really well. We get much bigger fish. Like, we're getting way bigger fish now than when I was a kid. But they're smarter now, because when I was 6 years old and started fly fishing, if someone hooked that cutthroat, like, it might not have gone into a net. It might have gone straight into a frying pan.
Right.
Right? And so that gets removed from the gene pool. It doesn't get any smarter. Whereas now we release that fish and it's like, oh, wow, that hopper had a sharp pointy butt. I'm going to avoid those in the future. Right? And so fish get smarter. They also get much larger.
How big do those fish get?
So for pure West Slope cutties, like 22 inches is
Really?
probably the top end of what we typically see.
Wow, you can get west slope cutties up to 22. That's amazing.
Yeah, we've got
Jeez.
some mountain streams that have a similar level of nutrients that you would see on a tailwater. And so the insect hatches are so incredible.
Crazy.
It's usually where you've got multiple tribs that are dumping into a main stem or something like that. And because of that, you've got more nutrients, you've got more bugs, and you've got these big, super healthy fish. We had some of those rivers that also started, they got rainbows in them. And so we started seeing cut bows, and cut bows are just kind of these freaks that we had cut bows up to, I think 26.5 was the biggest cut bow.
Wow.
That somebody, and so you're in this little mountain stream that, like, you can reach the other side of the river with your rod tip almost in some places. And then you've got a 26-inch fish that came up and ate a dry fly and is now, like, going over a ledge and, like, into your backing going downstream.
Wow.
And you're like, I'll be back, hopefully.
So it's got a mix of, so it's the cut bow, so it's got the slashes like a cutthroat, but it's like, how does it look like a rainbow? Just how could you tell?
So a lot of those fish look very little like the rainbow, other than the fact that they have more spotting through their side. Whereas those cutthroat, you got heavy spotting in the tail and on the back, but through their side, with the west slopes, there's very little spotting going down their side. Those cut bows have more spotting throughout the side. They've got the pink in the cheek of a rainbow. It's a little bit lighter colored. It's not as that kind of like those West Slopes are that kind of nice goldenish, yellowy, peachy color. They don't have as much of the yellow in them at all. They're much more silver sided. But for whatever reason, the hybrid, like, and I get it, like the West Slope cutthroat is such an important fish, and we don't want to lose those pure genetics. But when we had those hybrids everywhere, they were just these genetic freaks that they got heavier shoulders. They were deeper than the rainbows, deeper than the cutthroat. So they just turned into this like specimen. They took the best of both worlds where they fought like a rainbow. They jumped like a rainbow. They came to the surface for dries like a cutthroat. They live in the most beautiful parts of the world.
Wow.
Like cutthroat did. Like they were just this exceptional fish. And yeah, you could commonly have fish in that 20 to 24 inch range that were cut bows.
That's crazy.
Mixed in there too. And they're super territorial like cutthroat too, so you knew where they lived.
Right, and then on the Bow River, is it now those are mostly rainbows down there, and then same thing, you just get big rainbows down there?
And browns, I would say, like especially from a guiding standpoint, as a photography standpoint, if I could talk.
Yeah.
I prefer the browns because like a rainbow looks like a rainbow looks like a rainbow. We've got incredible rainbows. The original rainbows that were stocked in the bow, like there's been no stocking in the bow since the 1970s. So we're going on like 55 years without any stocking. These are all wild fish. It's all wild genetics, and it shows. Like they're super strong fish. I've guided people from 53 different countries in the world now, and so many people are like, these are the strongest rainbows that I've ever fought, that I've ever hooked.
Because it's a big river. It's a big river.
Yeah, it's big river. It's big water. There's lots of food. They're healthy fish. They've got big shoulders. Like again, it's the same as a person. You can have someone like coaching basketball. I coached this 6'11", or this guy I play with is 7'1", but he's 185 pounds.
What, 7'1" and 185?
185.
Wow.
Right? Super, super skinny, like beanpole. But then you've got a guy that's 5'1" and he's a bodybuilder or he's into jujitsu, and like he can break your body in half. He can tear your limbs off your body, right? Fish are the same way, that you can have a 20-inch trout that if it's super skinny, it's not that strong. You take a 16-inch fish that has, more body weight than that 20-inch fish because of its girth, because of its stroke. Like, what is that extra body weight coming from? It's coming from muscle on those fish. When they're fighting heavy current just to stay in the current on a river like the Bow, you get heavily muscled fish, but then you also get on a tailwater, you get soft enough pockets. It's not like when you're up in the mountains where there's nothing but heavy, fast water that they're fighting all the time and they're on a treadmill and now they're more of an endurance runner. Now we get fish that eat enough that they can bulk up and they can get big and they can be way more heavily muscled.
Yeah, and they can use the current, right? They can get out in the current and take you on that too.
Exactly, and they use it against you very well. And so the browns are exceptional here. Like for most people, we wouldn't consider him a big fish on the Bow until it's over 24. So 24 is usually that benchmark, and that's a big fish.
Let's take a break and check in with Jackson Hole Fly Company right now. The right gear can turn a good day on the water into an unforgettable one. Jackson Hole Fly Company's combo kits are built to match the rhythm of the river, giving you everything you need in one simple package. Each kit pairs a perfectly matched rod and reel with essential accessories, ready to fish right out of the box. From the beginner-friendly Crystal Creek to the high-performance Flat Creek, there's a setup for every angler. And don't forget about their packs and slings. I've been loving my Jackson Hole Sling Pack for a number of years now. The perfect size to fit all your gear, but not too heavy and not too big to drag you down. Check out their slings and rods and much more at jacksonholeflycompany.com. And you can support this podcast by checking in with Jackson Hole Fly Company today. If you've been holding off on getting a new fly rod because of the price tag, San Juan Rodworks just changed the game. These rods are dialed in with the right action, clean design, and built to fish hard without the high price tag. Whether you're stripping streamers, tight lining, or dead drift and dries, they've got a setup that feels right from the first cast. And the best part is you can try any rod, reel, or fly line for 30 days risk-free. And if you're not 100% satisfied, you can send it back for a full refund. Check them out right now. That's sanjuanrodworks.com. SANJUAN Rodworks.com. You support this podcast by checking in with San Juan now. So if we're on the Bow with you, we're going to be thinking 24 plus inch fish is going to be a goal out for us.
Yeah, and it would be a fairly rare occurrence that you wouldn't have an interaction with a fish that size. Now, whether you hook that fish, whether you land that fish,
Totally. The 20 fish guarantee, is that still valid? Are you still working that these days?
no, no, that's it. No, that's it. So as soon as I got to the point that I was no longer doing all the trips or even the majority of the trips, so when it was just me, I could do that. But it was different when it became other guides, and the pressure that they felt from that was one of those like, and it also became that thing that it was more about the experience and how much you're actually teaching someone. Like the way I guide now is so different than I used to guide back then. And when I was young, in my head, trying to pay for university, like this is such an expensive day. I would want every second I could out of it, and I would want the most fish I could get out of it. And it was just you fished through the people in your boat. Like they would cast too far and you would move the boat to drag the flies in line with where they needed to be. They would have too much tension and they couldn't mend properly. So you'd move the boat towards it to take the tension off the line because you knew you were about to hit a bucket. They would hit that fish and they're like, oh, I think it's bottoming. You're like, it's a fish. You would turn the bow of the boat to tighten the line and oh, it is a fish. Right. And now like they're pinning the fish and they put too much tension on it and it's going to break. So you row at the fish. Right. They lose tension. And so you row away from the fish and you would land fish through your gas. And at the end of the day, people are pumped because they caught their fish. And I'll never forget, Dave, it was the worst feeling. I saw a guest that I really enjoyed the day with them. They were so much fun. They had hands down the best day of fishing of their lives on the river in my boat. And that, like, as a young guide, that made me so proud to know people were having these great days. Well, I see him 5 years later and he's booking a trip. And I'm like, he shows up for his trip. And I'm like, how's it been? You've been fishing, like getting fish on the bow now? And he's like, no, I haven't caught a fish on the bow since I fished with you.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, oh, you've been too busy working. You haven't been fishing it? He's like, no, I've been fishing it a ton. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, no, like, and I realized I was catching fish through my guests. I wasn't teaching my guests how to catch fish when I wasn't there. And I did everything in my power to give them the best possible day that day. But that was only helping them for 8 to 12 hours.
The teach a man to fish, right? That the old story, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it completely changed the way I guided, where I was like, okay, we can't just be focusing on how many fish did I catch today? Like, did I catch 12? And that whole, like, you get into a marina in Mexico and how many flags are up and you get into the boat launch. Guys, how many fish did you catch? Well, like when we stopped just indicator fishing and we started like hunting fish and we started teaching people how to cast better and we started dry fly fishing, you're not going to hook as many fish in a day. Or you might have, like, we've had days, like Naoto and I would talk about days where we're talking about like 50 and 80 eats on dry flies. And you
Yeah.
had
Wow.
guests that maybe landed two of those. And so they go home. And that was always the thing where it's like, what is the best way to do this? Like, what's most important? Like, is it just about them getting fish? Because sure, if you're just trying to put fish in that, sure, you can float down with bobbers on beside the boats and you're going to catch a whack load of fish, even if you don't know where you're going, you just let the current take you. But does someone know what they're doing to be able to replicate that? Because if you're floating down the middle of the river in the main channel, well, an angler on shore can't do that. They can't replicate that. So how have you helped them? So yes, you can take them to shore and get them out of the boat and teach them how to fish it from shore. And you can do that whether it's an indicator or streamer fishing or dry flies. But are you actually helping them become a better angler so that he or she can catch more fish on their own when they go out? And that was the thing that changed. And when we started doing all of this dry fly fishing, it was amazing. Where I was like, man, we're seeing similar or higher numbers of fish that are eating dries than we were having landed fish on indicators, but they're just not landing as many fish.
Is that what you guys were doing? Where you focus more on like indicators and streamers
When
and
I was
yeah.
young, yeah, because you look around and you see most of the guide boats and you're like, huh, virtually everyone is running indicators. So I guess we should be running indicators. And you're like, yeah, they've got a bent rod. They've got a bent rod. And you're like, oh, okay, it's hopper season or stonefly season. I'm going to run dry flies there. But so much of even then, it's the best ever day I've had of like fishing foam. So it was stoneflies, not hoppers. They had 114 eats in a day
On like a foam, like a grasshopper
on
or
a
what?
single foam stonefly. So fishing a stonefly, no droppers, just one fly, two people in the boat. They're two brothers. They had 114 eats. And I don't often count, but it was just getting so silly that we kept track and kept counting. Out of those 114, they landed 14 fish.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't count any fish that looked like it was anywhere near or below 16 inches. So, and I mean, that's the nice thing also about
fishing a size 6 foam bug, you weed out a lot of those small fish that they can't wrap their lips around a bug that big. And so you're going to see more of the big fish than, you're not going to get an 8-inch fish.
Out of those 114 that day, how many were actually hooked where they had them on for a little bit?
I don't know how many were hooked. There were 14 landed out of the 114.
Yeah, 14 landed, yeah.
14 of those were landed. Some of those were hooked and fought and came off, but so many of them were just missed on the take. And honestly, if there's anything that people ask how they missed that many fish, it's so different when you're in a drift boat, because most of us grew up or learned to dry fly fish out of a boat fishing upstream. And you watch fish rise, and as you see its nose come up, you set the hook, and its mouth is still wide open, but it's facing away from you. So you can set 3 seconds too early, and there's a good chance that you're going to pull that hook and it's going to catch the corner of their mouth because it's facing away from you. When you're dry fly fishing out of a drift boat, you're leading the boat. So now the fish's mouth is facing you. So when that fish rolls, and especially with really big foam bugs, like our fish know that that meal is not the most important thing. Not drawing attention to yourself and the attention of predators is their number one priority. So it's not a big aggressive, they don't smoke it. They roll super slow, and they'll roll, and you can have a 25, 26 plus inch fish that they roll and there's hardly rings because their number one priority is don't draw attention to yourself. We've got bald eagles, we've got herons, we've got ospreys, we've got cormorants, we've got pelicans, we've got mercansers, we've got every stage of a fish's life, there's a bird that's trying to eat them until they're probably over that 24-inch range. But at that point, it's still so ingrained in them to watch out for birds. So those fish roll super slow and they roll with an open mouth. So what happens when you see a giant snout appear and it rolls on your fly? Everyone get excited and they set the hook, but their mouth is still open. And I mean, I've sat on a bank and photographed fish. I've spent hours. Like, if I have a day off now, I'm more likely to be on the river without a rod, just with a camera, photographing fish or filming fish, than I am to actually be fishing. And I can promise you, I have learned exponentially more while just observing and photographing fish than in almost 25 years of guiding and watching them while we're trying to put a sharp pointing object in their face. You're distracted by so many things, and you see a fish rise once and then you cast to it and you hook it. And what did you learn? That fish is willing to eat my fly. But that's the only thing you learned. When you watch a fish for 4 hours, you learn, man, he's ignoring every single PMD and he's only eating caddis. He hasn't eaten a single caddis that's sitting still. He ate every caddis that was actually running and moving, or vice versa, right? And I've sat in the mountains and watched cutthroat that they will ignore green drakes and only eat midges. They're ignoring hoppers and they're only eating midges. And you're like, why? Well, chances are if every angler throws a giant bug, they get really scared of giant bugs. Very few anglers throw that size 22 midge, so that becomes a safe thing. If every angler is throwing size 22 midge, well, that becomes the dangerous fly, and that size, 2 grasshopper might be the safe fly.
That's amazing. When you're casting that dry out there, you mentioned, the take. So the big fish, it's coming. When do you set the hook? Talk about that. If it's coming up, the mouth is open. How do you coach somebody to make sure?
Once the mouth is closed, and that's people are like, what? And they're like, how do you see that? I'm like, for one, it does take some time and practice, because the first time you see a fish eat your dry fly, it's just full panic, and that's okay. Like, it's not going to help you catch fish, but that's part of the learning curve, right? The first time you see it, it's so exciting. You freak out and you rip the fly out of their mouth. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, that was awesome. I'm like, you just saved that fly's life. That fish was about to annihilate that fly, fill it full of tooth.
Bummer.
I'm like, if there was a bunch of tooth marks in that fly, there's no way I can resell that fly. So you just save that fly's life. People are like, you're a prick. I hate it. Right. But it's waiting till that fish closes. If you can see the white of the mouth, its mouth is still closed. And I used to tell people, like, wait till it drops, wait till it's underwater. And my buddy, Stephen Palmer, he's a fishing manager at the Orvis Plano store in Texas. And he was up here with a group of clients. He was hosting a trip with us, and he had missed a couple of fish. I'm like, you got to wait till it drops. So the next fish rolls and it drops, and they'll roll super slow where it's coming up. Its nose just breaks. It grabs the fly, it rolls. It slowly rolls because it doesn't want to make a ripple. It doesn't want to draw any attention to itself. It dropped. It was underwater completely. He set the hook and he missed it. And he's like, what? He's like, I waited so long. I'm like, you did. You 100% waited, but I could see your fly and I could see the white of its mouth 6 inches below the surface of the water. That fish rolled. For whatever reason, it hadn't closed its mouth yet. If its mouth is still open and the fish is facing you, when you set the hook, you will pull it out of the mouth every single time. So you have to wait until that fish's mouth is closed. And I've taken high-speed video where we're filming like at 300 frames a second, and you watch fish that they roll, and you can see them, and they're sometimes like 6-8 inches below the surface, and they haven't closed their mouth yet. There's other fish that have closed their mouth when their mouth is still out of the water. So there's not a rule like count to one.
What do you do with all that video that you're taking there with all the cool?
So a lot of that video was always like I would do that for B-roll for a bunch of the shows. So my buddy Nick Pujic used to do a ton of, like, I don't know, we'd done probably between 40 and 50 different episodes of TV shows together. But TV's not really a thing anymore. So like I haven't done a TV show in probably 10 years.
Like what type of TV? Where were those shows aired?
So like Fly Nation was one of the hosts on, like that's where I met Nauto, who was our head guide, and like that's where I met April, and that's where I met Paul Castellano, and that's where, and like some of my closest group of friends, we were all a host of Nick's show.
And that was just on like broadcast. Was Fly Nation on broadcast television?
Exactly. So it was on broadcast. So it was on WFN at the time, but that was the thing, is that I was just guiding or helping with filming on those shows, but those shows were then sold to networks, so the networks own the rights to it. So it's not stuff that's on YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah. So it's hard to find, but you have video. You've seen lots of fish out there, basically doing this.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of the video we also used when we were filming April's the Anchored Outdoors masterclass. So I did a masterclass for her. The first one was on tailwater fishing, but the second one we did was on like fishing to very educated, spooky fish. How do you target those biggest fish? How do you target the smartest fish? How do you target the fish that are in high traffic areas that they see a ton of pressure? How do you catch those fish? Because so many people, that's where they're fishing. They're not fishing the stream that gets walked twice a year. They're fishing the stream that gets walked twice every 5 minutes. Right. And so how do you help those people still catch fish? And so that's why we did that masterclass. And some of that footage, there's a lot of that footage that was put in there. And we saw some crazy, I saw something in there. This was, when you talk about the reactions of pressured fish. So we didn't have any rods with us. We went and caught grasshoppers, like a bunch of little kids running around trying to catch grasshoppers in your hat. I went to a pool that's it's at a provincial park. It's right below a waterfall. That gets a ton of foot traffic, tourists, fished all the time, so much pressure there, but it has fish in it too, and it has some nice fish in it too, but they're so heavily pressured. I threw a grasshopper and we filmed it going through the pool. It got rushed by 3 different fish. They got to it and they flared on it. The hopper kicked and they raced back to it and they looked at it. They're like, oh, I want to eat it so bad. And then they would flare on it. And then the hopper kicks again. They're like, it is real. And they would race back to it and then they would flare on it. And then they let it go through the pool and didn't touch it. I threw 28 grasshoppers through that pool before even one of them got eaten. Once one of them got eaten, the first one that got eaten, it actually blew me away what happened. So we saw this on high-speed camera, 300 frames a second. You could see this. Fish came up and ate it. Immediately upon eating, we couldn't see this by the naked eye. I had no idea this happened until I looked on camera after. Fish ate it, spit it out. As soon as it got under the water, it spit it out. And then there was this brief pause where it was like, no, that was real. And it grabbed it again. And because of all the bubbles and the whitewash from the eat, you couldn't tell that happened. It just looked like he came up and ate it. But he ate it, immediately spit it, and then went, no, that was fine. And you think about like the wing case on a grasshopper. If you've ever held hoppers in your hand, like as a little kid, we had a pond on our farm. And when I was going to like fix fences or move cows, I would be grabbing like frogs and grasshopper, anything I could throw in the water to watch a fish eat it. And so you can get poked by that. It's sharp. It feels like a hook. So trout are probably very used to biting down on a real grasshopper and getting poked. So that's why, like, when you miss them on a fly, like, leave the fly there. They'll often come back and eat it. And so that fish ate. But the crazy thing, Dave, this blew my mind. So 28 grasshoppers went through that pool. I have no idea how many different fish in total, but I would guess up to 10 different fish that raced up to that grasshopper, looked at it, flared on it, and then didn't eat it. As soon as the first one got eaten, we threw 56 grasshoppers through that pool. Not another one made it out to tail out alive. Every single grasshopper got eaten after that. Because it's such a heavily pressured part of they're hardwired. They want that bug so badly because it's so much food and winter's coming. Like this was late September, early October. They know winter's coming. It's going to be cold. That's so much food value in one package. But Like I ask people this all the time. On your best day of hopper fishing that you've ever had in your life, how many natural grasshoppers did you see on the water?
Right. That's true.
Almost none. Now, if you saw 100 anglers that day, how many anglers had a hopper on their rod?
Yeah.
95, 98. So now 98 out of 100 hoppers have a sharp, pointy butt. So those are dangerous. Now, when there's a midge hatch or there's a blue-winged olive hatch, how many of those do you see on the water? Tens of thousands? And out of those 100 anglers, we saw maybe, or those 5, someone's probably throwing a beetle, someone's probably throwing an ant, someone's throwing a green drake, one midge, one blue-winged olive. So we've got one midge or one blue-winged olive or little ant or little beetle, one small fly. And like how many, like I don't know the number, but how many midges do you have to eat to equal one size 2 grasshopper? It's probably a ton. So now they're eating all of these naturals and virtually everyone. And so tens of thousands of those are safe for every one that had that sharp, pointy butt. And that one's not safe.
That's it. Wow, this is cool. So this is great, Josh, because I think we're going to have to bring you back on here. I love that there's so much information. We're just touching the surface on this, but I want to talk some tips before we get out of here. You're on this track here, but fly casting, I think you have some background. Tell me if I'm wrong, but kind of your college or university background, like you studied like tracking, and this applies to fly casting. Maybe describe what that was you studied in college, and am I right on that track a little bit?
Yeah. So my master's thesis was an eye tracking study where I looked at the visual characteristics of expert fly casters and how manipulating attentional focus will affect outcome accuracy. I always try and do that in one breath.
Yeah, there you go. Well done.
Like we've all done, right? And so that was, I can nerd out on casting so much.
So you literally in college at your university, you actually studied fly casting specific topic.
Yeah, so that was my thesis title that I just rattled off there.
Yeah.
So I was doing an eye tracking study. So I was monitoring the eye movements. I was looking at master certified casting instructors because I was trying to the premise of my thesis was there's no question that proper mechanics are necessary for an accurate performance, but does that mean it's sufficient? Right? So if you've got we've got missiles that you can send, around the world and it can land within meters of a target. But what happens if you launch that missile and you don't put in the proper coordinates? Can you expect it to hit a target? So I was looking at master certified casting instructors that should have not only this exceptional level of mechanics in place, but the ability to break down anyone's cast and their mechanics. So if they all have this exceptional mechanics in place, why were some of them hitting 2 and 3 targets out of 20 and some of them were hitting 18 and 19 targets out of 20? And the huge difference we saw is there's a big difference with what they did with their eyes. And that's where I met Tim Rajeff. He was casting my study, became good friends with him. One of the greatest casters that we've ever had,
sure.
And one of the greatest human beings. I know you've had him on your podcast.
Yep.
I became good friends with Tim because I was this 20-year-old kid, grad student that's used to being treated 6 steps below dirt. And now you've got a world champion caster who's calling me like a giddy little schoolgirl excited. He's like, have you seen my data? What can you tell me? And I'll never
Awesome.
forget as a 20-something-year-old kid talking to Tim and telling him I'd looked at some of the data and telling him what I'd seen and finding the target early and the most hits you had were when you found the target earliest and you locked your eyes on the target. And he was so he was super locked in and he started practicing that stuff. He called me up, and for me at that point in my guide career and just even as a university student, it was one of the most influential phone calls I've ever had because he's like, dude, I was just at IFTD. They have the fly casting competition. I did it. He's like, I was thinking about all the eye stuff that you talked about, and I was focusing on the target or focusing on my eyes. He's like, I got the first ever perfect score in the accuracy round.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, dude, that's amazing. He's like, in the second round, I got a perfect score again. I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, so you won it? He's like, well, no, I actually didn't. I'm like, what? The last thing where they had to cast your loop through a hula hoop hanging. He's like, it's the easiest thing, but he was like, I was so focused on the eyes and trying to think about looking at the middle of the target.
Right.
But the hoop was hanging. He's like, there was people walking by in the background. And I got distracted and I screwed it up. So I got second. I was like, but it was the coolest thing because I had a Tim Rajeff tell me, he's like, I teach people for a living. And this is one of the first times in a long time someone's actually helped me become a better caster. And I was just like, could you put that in writing, please? Right? You're a little kid that's so excited.
How would you describe that again? So what the study, break it down to just for the basic. What was it that somebody could take away from that?
So someone's wearing a set of glasses that has an eye tracker attached to it. So there's two cameras off of this set of glasses. One is right in between your eyes on the bridge of your nose, and that's called the scene camera. So it just captures wherever you point your head, it's looking at that scene. And so it captures your visual field, essentially. There's a second camera and an illuminator light that reflects off a monocle or a prism into your eye. Based on pupil edge detection and corneal reflection, we can tell where your fovea is. The fovea is the only point in your eye that you have acute vision, so that you can actually like read something, that you can tell any type of detail. So that's your fovea. We would then have each of the people look at a 9-point grid. And I would tell you, if you're wearing the eye tracker, Dave, look at point 1. While you're looking at point 1, I tell the computer Dave's eye is now looking at point 1. And we do that 1 through 9. Once we've told the computer that, now that software tracks your eyes. And there will be a little red circle called the gaze cursor, GAZE, that moves wherever you look. So wherever you look, it follows your vision around. And so while they were casting these targets, I was monitoring all their eye movements. And what I was looking at was basically, if you're focusing internally on your own body movement, so thinking about your arm, where it is in space and more the mechanics, versus if you're just solely focused on look at the target, lock in on the target, that's it, which is more conducive to accuracy. And that external focus was much more helpful in terms of accuracy. So it was about neuromotor control, and is an internal focus or an external focus more conducive to accuracy? But it's one of those things too that, from my standpoint, when you have, and there was another video camera that's just a regular video camera that shot from the side that would sync the two videos in time. I would have to splice them and put them together, so that while Tim was wearing the eye tracker, on the left-hand side, I saw Tim casting, just a regular video camera. But on the right-hand side, I could see what he was looking at with the gaze cursor wherever he looked. So I had to go through every single frame of data, one frame at a time, and account for what was he looking at. Was it an eye movement? Was it a fixation on a stable point? Was it a blink? Was it like an eye movement, a saccade? So a saccade just means that it's an eye movement. I'm like, your eyes move so quickly that your brain actually suppresses visual information during an eye movement. And then as soon as your eye gets somewhere stable and slows down, then you get the information back again.
Wow.
And so I had to code every single, so for an hour and a half of data for each of the 11 participants, I had to go through one frame at a time and say the gaze cursor is on the target, it is fixation, or this is now a blink that lasted for 4 frames. Every single frame of data, I had to account for where their eyes were. So it was looking at eye movements, it was looking at neuromotor control. But from my standpoint, it's one of those things where if you have video footage of some of the best casters on the planet and you don't look at it and break it down and learn from it, you're an idiot.
What would be, say, somebody listening now, how could they use this knowledge for maybe a few tips for their casting like today?
One of the big things is, like, your eyes are the targeting system for your brain. And it sounds intuitive, but at the same time, we forget that, where like master certified casting instructors would be casting to these targets and they had never actually had a fixation. So a fixation is 100 milliseconds. So 3 frames of video. They had never had a single fixation at the target that they were casting to until the point of their, they were allowed 3 false casts and had to deliver on the 3rd false cast. Cause I didn't want them just like false casting continuously until they measured the distance and then just laid it down.
Yep.
So they only had 3 false casts to deliver the fly, which did make it challenging, and they all complained about it and said it was too hard. But some of them had never looked at the target until their final false cast. And at that point, like, we know physics says that the line is committed to the path that the rod tip comes to a stop. Once it comes to a stop, it has to go in that direction. So they've already committed the fly there, and that's the first time they'd looked at the target. They'd been looking at everything in their visual field. So they looked at the near target, the far target, the edge of the paper, the side of the paper, someone that ran by on the track in the Jack Simpson gym, and their eyes, it looked like it had Tourette's. Like, it was just all over the place. And in all of those movements, they tried to look at everything, and your brain is then able to process nothing. So what is your relevant cue that you're looking at? And people forget too, if you're casting to a rising trout in a lake, well, that cruising fish, when you see the rings, that ring isn't your relevant cue anymore, because you know that fish is cruising. You have to go, did that fish is it going left to right? Is it going right to left? Is it going away from me? Is it coming towards me? And now you have to reference your distance from that point and then look at the point that you want your fly to land. If I'm staring at the rings and I know that that fish is going left to right, and I continue to look at the rings where that fish no longer is, there's a really good chance my fly is going to go to the rings, not to where I wanted it to go. Right?
Yeah.
If I'm like, when people are skiing, you tell people, if you're skiing in the trees, like, look where you want to go, not at what you're scared to hit.
Or the other great one, and you'll appreciate this as a Canadian, is Gretzky, the famous quote, "I go where the puck is going to be, not where it is," right? Or whatever that
Exactly.
quote is. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the exact same thing that we need to do with the fish. Is if you're casting to a rising fish on a river, I've seen so many people short a fish and short a fish and short a fish. And sometimes they're scared to line it. And so that's where some of that comes from. But so often, and it took me a while as a guide to realize, they're casting to where they saw the rings, not to where the fish ate.
Right.
And you think, when a fish is in a river, as it rises up off the bottom, what is happening to that fish? The current's pushing it backwards. And then it eats on the surface. And as it eats, it doesn't sink straight down from there. It returns to its lie that, depending on the speed of the water, it might be 3 feet further forward. It might be 1.5 feet. It might be 6 feet further forward. So where is the fish sitting and where is it looking? And that's where you need to be looking, because if you cast to where the rings were, the rings are 4 feet behind that fish.
Yeah. So you're estimating. So to put this into knowledge on the river, you're kind of like Gretzky was. You're kind of predicting, like, okay, this is where I think that fish is going to be, and then I'm laser focused on that spot, and that's where I'm casting.
On that spot, and that's where I need to cast.
That one little spot. And I've heard this before. People talk. I've had some instructors on here talk about, instead of casting into the ring, that little pie plate or whatever, actually, or focus on a blade of grass in the middle of it, and that's what you focus on, right? That's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, the more narrow your focus is, the more likely you are to hit it. It was interesting, like, one of the participants in the study, they were supposed to be casting to the middle of the target. He was looking at the edge of the target, and I could see it on the monitor while he was casting. He was looking at it, because naturally, the first thing that our eyes detect is movement. There's no movement on a stationary target. So what's the second thing that our eyes detect? Edge detection. That's how we use the profile of something to figure out what it is. I look at the edges of it and find out that's a person. Look at the edges of that. Well, that's a spruce tree, right? He was looking at the edge where this bright blue target met white paper. And so his eyes were locked on that. He had about 8 casts that touched the edge of the target. So he was actually one of the most accurate in terms of, in that trial, the number of hits that he had. But it was also measured off of the middle of the target, because the instructions were be as accurate as possible and try and hit the center of the target. So his numbers looked like he wasn't anywhere near as accurate as some of the other casters, but he was actually very accurate in hitting where he was looking. He just wasn't looking in the right place. Same sort of thing. He was looking where the rings were, not where the fish is, that type of analogy.
Amazing.
And so it's like your eyes are the targeting system for your brain. You can't expect your brain to put that fly somewhere that you haven't told it where that exists in space. You have to enter coordinates before you send the missile. You have to enter the coordinates in your brain by taking a stable look at that target. And you see people, like, we'll tell people when we're teaching them to cast, like, watch your back cast, watch the tip of your rod. Yes, when you're learning mechanics, when those mechanics are second nature and you're trying to catch a fish, you shouldn't be looking at the line on the back cast. You shouldn't be looking at your rod tip. You should be focused on that target, and you should find the target early. The earlier you find the target, and the better chance you give your brain to understand where that target is in space, the more likely you are to be able to hit that target.
And that's where the reps come in, where that you hear, again, a lot of great guides and cast instructors, they say, get the reps in. They're still doing, the more you practice, because then when you're in the moment, just like Michael Jordan, at the free throw line or whatever, the clutch shot, LeBron James, it's like, well, guess what? He's already taken that shot like 1,000 times in practice.
Exactly.
And he doesn't have to think about it.
And it was one of the best examples. I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to bring it up earlier, and I'll say it now. Michael Jordan, the clutch shot. But do you remember, it was mid-90s, Michael Jordan in the All-Star game shoots a free throw with his eyes closed and he hits it.
The great thing is I'm a huge basketball fan, and Michael Jordan, since I was like 8 years old, was always my hero.
Yeah.
And so I've seen every Michael Jordan thing. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. He's like,
the interesting thing about that, because like growing up as a short white kid in Canada, like everyone assumes you play hockey. You're like, no, I play basketball. And they look at someone 5'7" and they're like, you?
Yeah.
Like, thanks. But it was funny because I was all like, Michael Jordan was a favorite player. I'd idolized Michael Jordan, and I watched him do that, and I thought that was so amazing. And then when I did all of my research on my thesis, and my supervisor actually did studies on free throws with the University of Calgary Dinos basketball team, and one of the things they learned doing that study is the moment that someone was shooting a free throw, when the ball occluded their vision, so when the ball passed through their line of sight, so they couldn't see the basket, they actually thought the eye tracker was broken because their eyes just like stopped paying attention to anything. And so it's such a brief moment that you don't really notice it until you're going through a frame at a time. But the look at the target at the point, like, so it's called this quiet eye period, that's the period that you have to have that stable look at the target. What you do after that final movement phase. So with a free throw, that final movement phase was defined as the first upward movement. Once you started that upward movement to start your free throw, what you did with your eyes did not matter anymore. Everything was about what you'd done previous to that point. And so it was so funny to see that, like Michael Jordan did, he looked at the target, like he looked at the back of the hoop. He stared at it, he spins the ball, he looks at the guys, he kind of heckles the guys, then he closes his eyes and he shoots and he hits it. And I was like, that is so amazing. And then I did the research and looked at the papers that my supervisor had published and looked at it and realized at the point that he started that upward movement, which is when he closes his eyes, he's already told his brain where the target is in space. It didn't matter what he looked at that point. So
Yeah, that's
like
amazing.
it was one of those like, oh, that was kind of sad. Like that kind of, myth busted one of my hero's big moments in my mind. But it was important to know that it's like the look you have at your target before that is what matters. Like at the point that you start to deliver that cast, physics says that the line's already committed to that direction. It's too late. You had to have seen it before. Get your look at the target in early and the longest kind of stable look you can have at your target. But again, your target is where you want the fly to go, not necessarily where the fish is. Like if I'm fishing to a permit, if I'm dropping it on his head, sure, that's my target because he's tailing. But if he's moving and I need to lead him by 5 feet, I can't look at the target and hit it. And how many people have thrown a cast at a bonefish or a permit? And the guy's like, oh, you landed it on him, you spooked him. I told you to lead him. They're like, yeah, sorry, it was just a bad cast. Maybe it wasn't a bad cast. If you're staring at that permit while it's swimming and then you cast, you're probably going to hit the permit. You needed to be staring 5 feet in front of the permit if you have any expectation of the fly actually landing 5 feet in front of the permit.
I love all of the sports analogies. This is always a fun part, because again, and LeBron again. I will just do one more out here. I went to a game recently. It was the first time I've seen LeBron live, and I've always followed LeBron. I just whatever, he's one of the great. But man, I watched that guy in warm-ups. I was pretty close. Actually, shout out to Ben in our Wet Fly Swing Pro community. He actually hooked me up with tickets there.
Nice.
But we had.
I need to know Ben.
Yeah, you should check with Ben. He's amazing. He does all the he's the production manager for the Los Angeles Lakers and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Right? So he actually
I want to know him even more.
So
now.
he gets tickets.
Awesome.
So he there was a Portland game.
Ben.
Yeah, exactly. We'll hook you up. But there's a Portland game. He's like, Dave, I know you love basketball. And he got us tickets. So we went there and we were really close we were in the LA side, right? Because we were on his team.
Yeah.
And man, I watched LeBron and shooting in practice. It was crazy, just warm-ups. And he shot 7 3-pointers in a row. Some of them were fading away, and just swish, 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 7 in a row. And I was like, damn. And being able to see that guy, I've been watching a lot of more video highlight stuff. I mean, I think, again, this is going to be hard to say. You're a Michael Jordan fan. I am too. But I think from the stats, there's a lot of evidence to say maybe LeBron is the greatest just because of the time he's been doing this and what he's done.
Yeah, how long he's done it is impressive. His staying power, doing it on multiple teams. I'm still going to say Jordan.
Yeah,
final
me too.
Answer.
Me too.
But
I know.
I got to see him play. My buddy and I, Kosh, our hosted travel manager, we were down in Florida.
You saw Jordan?
No, I never got to see Jordan.
Yeah.
My parents had got me tickets when I was in grade 11. To go see him play the Vancouver Grizzlies because that's when the Grizzlies were still there. And that was going to be my birthday present. And it ended up the game was the night before my Math 30 diploma. So like the government diploma that's worth 30% of your final grade.
Oh, yeah.
I had always done math like a year ahead and on my own through school. And so I was only like first semester of grade 11, writing the grade 12 math final that's worth 50% of your final grade, getting into university, everything like that. And so like that had been my birthday present and I couldn't go because of the school thing. But we were in Florida and we're supposed to do a trip in the Everglades. I've fished the Keys a lot. I've been lucky. I've got friends down there that I go down and fish with, but I'd never fished in the Everglades. And we booked this trip with a guide, and there was a tropical storm. The weather wasn't great, but the guy just bailed on us. He's like, "No, it's not going to be good. I'm going to cancel." And we were like, "Man, we've already flown here. We've already paid for our hotels. We've been here for 4 days. Like, let's just go." He's like, "No, it won't be good." I'm like, "Man, we get it. Like, we hadn't mentioned this before, but like, we guide. We do this for a living. You can't control the weather. You can't control the fish. We totally understand that. We just desperately want to fish." He's like, "No, it's going to suck. So we're not going to go." And he's like, I'll give you your deposit back, but I'm not going. And we're just like, man. And we're like, what are we going to do? But we took the money from the trip, and it was game 1 of the Heat versus the Spurs.
Oh,
in
yeah.
the NBA Finals.
Right.
And we're like, when in our lives will we ever get to go? I met Kosh when he was coaching for the the University of Calgary's club team. Akasha, our hosted travel manager, who I fish all over the world with, he and I met coaching basketball at the University of Calgary. They're club teams, not the university team, but the club team for the university. And so we were down there. We're like, let's go. We took the money from that because, I mean, to fly to a city, to get the hotels, to pay for the tickets, it would cost so much money to be able to afford that. I would never be able to do it. But I'm like, we're already here. The money we had towards the trip, we just put into the tickets. And like, we were in the nosebleeds, but I mean, you had so many Hall of Famers in there because Tim Duncan was there. You had Ginobili there. You had Tony Parker there.
Sure, that was
and then
great.
You had Dwayne Wade, and you had LeBron James. You had Chris Bosh, and you had Ray Allen. It was
Ray Allen, right? That's when they had, right?
Yeah, and so there was just so many Hall of Famers there, and we got to see that game because the guy bailed on us.
Wow. What was that? Did LeBron, I can't remember, did they win that series? I don't even remember. Yeah, they must have won.
I don't even remember, man. I know that the Spurs won that game, and I did not want them to. I love Tony Parker, but I did not like Ginobili.
The Spurs were a powerhouse. They were definitely huge.
They were.
Well, this is Josh. This is good. I always hate to leave these conversations when they're like this because I think we could talk hoops probably for hours as well.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
I think I'm going to respect your time here and cut this one off. But I think we're going to be following up with you because I feel like a trip up to your neck of the woods is something I've heard a lot of our listeners talk about. So I think we'll have to catch up with you. But we'll send everybody out to outflyfishing.com right now if they want to connect with you and find out more of what you have going. And yeah, man, appreciate all the time. This has been really awesome and look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Great talking to you, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Amazing, right? Your call to action today, if you shall wish to choose and take it, is to check in with Josh, let him know you heard this podcast. And if you're interested in trips, definitely check in with him, pick his brain. Definitely this guy could bring the good stuff all day long. So check in. And if you're interested in a trip with us, I think we might be putting something together here. Check in with me, Dave at wetflyswing.com anytime. And let me know if you're interested in a trip to the Bow River. All right, if you haven't already, please subscribe and follow this show. You'll get the next episode delivered to your inbox, which is In the Bucket podcast. Brian's back with another big episode. And I want to give a shout out before we get out of here as well. Lodge at Palisades Creek, if you're interested in heading that direction, fishing the South Fork, check in with the Lodge at Palisades Creek. Check in with the Lodge at Palisades Creek. We've got that one going right now. I want to thank you for listening in all the way to the very end today. Appreciate you for stopping by. I hope you have a great evening. Hope you have a great morning. And if it's afternoon, maybe you're on a road trip, midday, you're hanging out. Maybe it's sunshine, maybe it's warm, and you're getting ready to fire it up. I hope you have a good trip, and we will see you on that next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.